Merry meet, Annie here, Annie and Ernie. Waide got in touch with me today to let me know that he is having upload problems and asked if I could substitute for him today, and of course I'm glad to. I certainly will miss Waide, and I'm hoping that in some way he can share maybe a video response to this when he's up and running, because I know I was very interested in what he had to say on the subject. I think both of these questions are immensely important questions and personal in a way, something we each have to come to our own individual opinion regarding, which may be what our viewer was, or two viewers were thinking of when they put the questions in, whether they have an opinion that they're dealing with now, and if they do, I hope they'll respond to us so we know how they're dealing with the situations they referred to. But perhaps they are making their minds up how they're going to. We'll wait and see. For me, now let's take the first question, and that was about raising children in a pagan family, a pagan environment, how to deal with it. And I had a little one in my life when I was in my 30s. It was with a former husband. I raised his boy, and we had some considered discussions and decision-making on how to handle it. Our decision in those days, and of course that was quite some time ago now, was that we didn't want to put our son in the position of mom and dad telling him this is the way. We wanted to create an environment where he was free to explore lots of paths and come to his own way. There's lots of things to take into consideration. There's first, are you providing your child with the environment that, if you were lucky, you had as a young person, or if you wish you had as a young person, which is total freedom to explore all paths. Now, our take at that time was that we raised my son, my stepson, honoring the solstices and the equinoxes. And what that meant is, as a family, we had activities that we did, a lot of stuff out of doors. We were sailors. We had a sailboat. We camped. We hiked. We taught him the land as we knew it. And he worked with me in the kitchen. He cooked. He did artwork that was nature-centered. We studied all kinds of religions together. And the thing we did not do was attempt to raise a Wiccan child. And the decisions we made around that were intentional. We didn't want to set our child up for difficulties in the wider community. We didn't want him being set as different from his young friends, because we only had a few, my circle mates really, who had young children. The rest of the people that he would have been spending his time with as a youngster were not pagan. We didn't want to set him up with problems with his grandparents, with his mom, bless her heart. We focused on just teaching him the way of being one with the earth. Now, we did talk about the fact that for many people, including me, that God, the God he saw when he was with his mom and going to church, the God, the Christian God, that lots of people and lots of religions throughout time saw God in many different ways. So he did understand that God didn't have to be male or female. The only influence we tried to make when it came to his religion with his mom and with the wider world was we worked very hard to find the loving and beautiful aspects of Christianity to help him find those. Our decision was we didn't want to set up our child for challenges. We were not living in a place that it would have been easy for him to be a child that was different from other children. So what was he? He was a delightful imp, almost a fairy child. Loved nature and everything we did in nature and the seasons. He understood them so well. He was a pagan baby. Even if we didn't label that, even if we didn't present him with that label or limit him by labeling him. Now, that was how we chose to handle it. Most of my coven mates over the years have had a family altar and a family way of practice that was not Wiccan specific. Again, for two major reasons. One, not wanting to limit their child's experience of the divine, to provide an environment that expands and opens up many possibilities. And the other is because they if they were ready to be out of the closet and deal with whatever came their way in the wider world, that was all well and good, but there was an intent not to put their children in that situation. By the time the kids were getting to be in their teens, they may be asking questions that led them in a direction to spend some more time learning about the specific beliefs that their mom and dad practiced. Each family has to decide this for their own. I only have one set of coven mates from a former circle, actually, who are raising their children with the label Wicca and send them off into the world declaring themselves as such. I see it being beautiful in many ways, and it will change the world as families do this, but I also see what those children encounter. I personally wouldn't set my child up for that. But I know from my experience of raising my stepson, all the beautiful things about our spirituality that can be brought into the home, and the active partnering with your mate for raising children, and the active involvement of your entire family in religion that can be part of what we do without labeling it any particular pagan path. That's particularly important to me because one of the reasons why I drifted away from the religion of my childhood was my parents weren't particularly involved in it. We weren't particularly involved in it at home. It was Easter and Christmas we went off to church, and in between times it wasn't part of our lives, if you know what I mean. So blending spirituality in with your day-to-day life is such a powerful part of what we can be in a pagan or earth-based family without having to provide our child with yet another label. The power of their being able to create in the world the label they want for themselves, I think, is the one thing we want to be careful of. So let's talk about if you're a young person. Now, I do get asked a lot from young people. How do they discuss it with their parents? I'm assuming if one has to ask, how do I, that there is an awkwardness there, an expectation of a problem or a pushback. There are some parents who, no matter their religion, can be very welcome and opening. There are others, well, you know you're setting yourself up for conflict. I have two thoughts on this one. The first is, I really ask every young person who comes to me with this question, have you fully, deeply, and sincerely investigated the religion of your family? And the reason I do that is, you do not have to deny a connection to the earth, or history, or spiritual ecstasy, or mysticism. It is present in all religions in some form. Have you fully explored everything the religion of your family is? One of the reasons I coach that as an older person is we do want to respect our families. We have a history. It's not just our parents that were a specific religion, but our grandparents, their grandparents before them. Yes, if we're going back in time, we're going to go back to a different kind of root, but we honor our parents and our grandparents, the people we come from, the community that we are part of because of that. So I do say first, have you really investigated the religion that you were raised in? Do you understand all the mystical aspects of it, all the potential of what the divine is seen as in that religion? Can you explore a different kind of relationship to the divine within that religion, including nature-based practices, ritual, spell work as prayers, all the different things you can weave in from what we do in pagan practices that wouldn't be religiously specific? Many of you have already gone through that process, and I appreciate that. I'm mentioning it because I have coached as many young people who have ended up finding the beauty and power and connection to their personal history and their family and their loved ones by finding a new way to relate to the religion they were raised in. So aside from that, you're a young person. You've come to the place that you know you believe differently. You don't believe in the same things spiritually. You don't believe in the same aspects of the divine that your family does. My question then is, how much of that do you feel you need to share with your parents? Now, if you're a parent watching this, I'm not saying to your children, be sneaky little sons of a guns and sneak around behind your parents' back. I am saying that if you are a young person who is thinking powerfully enough at this point in your life to be making spiritual decisions about what you believe and don't believe in, then you have a right to hold that private. If you are mature enough to be exploring paganism as a religion, as your relationship to the divine, I say you have a right for that journey to be private. There's reasons we all have whether we can or cannot have that discussion with our parents. Even if we're a 40-something who's discovering this path midlife as we explore new things, what do we say to family members and friends who aren't pagan, and parents if our parents are still with us? It's a personal decision. But I'm saying that there is, again, so much of what we do that is not something that will put others on the defensive. If you're suddenly setting up images of Caradwin and Cernunnos in your room and you are doing things that will make your family uncomfortable, you're setting yourself up for that. And if you're okay with that, it's what it is. However, celebrating the seasons, having a personal relationship with the deities, living a certain way, living respectfully of your elders is part of traditional Wicca. There are ways to be truly who you are and explore, and one of the things is if you come out announcing, I'm a Wicca, I'm witch to your mom and dad who have no clue about any of this, and you're blindsiding them, is you've given them a label, and you may not feel the same way a month from now. You may want to explore different forms of spirituality. You're limiting yourself. You decide what you can and cannot share. Some of you will have parents who will be supportive of exploration. Some of your parents will be comfortable with exploration because they are hoping that you'll come back to your own family's heritage. Why wouldn't you want them to be that way? If you're a parent looking at your child, is what I'm referring to, why wouldn't you want your children to have what you had that meant so much to you? Some parents will be very glad that you're exploring because they think that you may or may not, and they're hoping you will, come back to your roots. Some, those free-spirited, more open-minded parents, will be glad that you're exploring. Others, of course, there isn't the basis to have a conversation. They will tell you what you must believe and what you must do. You will decide how much of that you need to do agreeably and with your family and with your community, which is probably not pagan. But aside from that, you will determine what your studies are. When I was a teenager, I started investigating all the different possibilities of what religion could be when I was, they say, 14, 15 years old. And I studied all the religions. I did faith comparisons and spent my time in my teen years on mythology and studying earth-based spirituality and the indigenous cultures of my own land and around the world and throughout time. And I was ready then, by the time I left home, to formalize what my personal path would be, to give it a name and decide how public I wanted to be about it. So I, on the one hand, will always say, first, have you truly explored where you came from? I'm not talking about the depths of your history. I'm talking the loved ones, the near history that you came from, your parents, your grandparents, the community around you. You don't have to set yourself up to be different or in opposition. You can explore so many things while staying connected to them. You'll decide how much and at what level. I'm not so sure that you necessarily want to feel that you have to share your deepest, most intimate spiritual journeys and explorations. I believe you can hold that private and personal and decide what you'll want to share. But even within that, there's so much what we do as pagans that is not offensive to people. It only becomes offensive generally when you start labeling it and calling it things. A young person who announces to their fundamentalist family, I'm a witch, deal with it, and expects understanding, well, we can do that at any point in our life. We can do it as a youngster, we can do it as a 40-something, a 50-something, or a 60-something, and set up. Then what happens? Is it what you want? Is that what you want to do? You probably have a sense of the kind of parents you have, and you need to respect them for what they are. Now, I'm going to just say that bluntly. It comes from my age. It comes from my relationship to my own parents and my grandparents, and what I chose to discuss with them, share with them, share of my deepest self, and hold private about my own beliefs and the path I was heading. I do know that if I had been a 15 or 16-year-old and had announced, at that point I believe I would have probably announced I was a Hindu. I was not a Hindu a year later. There was a world of beautiful things to be exploring, and I'm glad I didn't limit myself or label myself. You may have found the path that you will experience the rest of your life. But I just think that most of us don't live while we're at home in a situation where we can put a label on ourselves and strut amongst our family members with it. You know if you can. You know what your family dynamics are. You do not have to feel limited if you cannot. Because 99% of what we do is personal and intimate, and it is what we do privately. And nothing changes about that. Nothing involves sharing what you don't want to share when it comes to that. There's my thoughts on it. I don't know if they're going to come across as old lady thoughts, a little bit crotchety, a little bit stodgy, but that's my opinion on it. But my most strong opinion is that this is something that is so unique to each one of us and our situations, to the decisions we make as mom and dad, how we're going to raise our family, and to the decisions as the children in the family, making our decisions, what we hold personal and what we choose to share. If we have viewers who are struggling with this, I do wish you well. These two questions are so powerful, so important, and sometimes just so awkward to deal with, whether we're making decisions for a family, whether making decisions just for ourselves. This is really, really powerful, powerful stuff. There's one witch's opinion, both from the viewpoint of having raised a child and having been a child who realized early on she did not believe in the religion of her family. I wish you mirth and reverence, merry part,